Hello! So I've been on booktube officially for around a month now, meaning I've posted 4 or 5 videos. I can't exactly remember. I think this might be the 5th video. And I realized no one actually knows anything about me. So I wanted to do the booktube newbie tag because I feel like that's a fun way to get to know the newbie booktuber, but also I feel like it's a fun way to just get like everything out about like who I am as a YouTuber, I guess. I don't know if I can even call myself a YouTuber, and who I am as a reader and who I am as a writer, etc, 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 etc. So this is me doing the booktube newbie tag. So I've got the questions written on my phone, but I have inserted a few of my own questions because I feel like I'd like to talk about that just to give you a better insight into who I am, what I'm giving, what type of content I'll be putting out, and yeah. So the first question is, why did I start my YouTube channel? There are so many answers to this, but I'm going to try and keep it as concise as I can. I am a reader and a literature student to my very core. If you ask any of my childhood friends, any of my secondary school friends, any of my teachers from school, they would have all told you that I was going to go down the English literature route. I chose English literature and English language for my A-levels because I wanted at least half of my time at school to be discussing literature and writing and language and context and the use of language and the way that language impacts the world. And I found that so fascinating, and it drove me to study English literature for my undergraduate degree, which clearly wasn't enough for me because I then went forward to do English literature as a postgraduate degree, and I also considered doing an English literature PhD, but academia itself just got a little bit draining and I burnt out and I just couldn't imagine myself doing it again for another 4 years, which sucks, but it's fine because I rediscovered my love for reading and for literature during lockdown when I started reading again, and I stumbled across BookTok, which is where I decided to dip my feet in the waters of, book content creation. It felt less daunting. It wasn't as scary as YouTube. It wasn't as, large and frightening and just nerve-wracking as, BookTube is. And when you study English as a degree or as a course, or just do it for a form of academia, as much as you love it, it sort of takes the fun of it away, which meant that for those 5-6 years that I was an English literature student, I didn't really read for fun anymore, and it wasn't as exciting for me. I had to read 3 books a week for my university degree, and all of them had to be read in a critical, analytical manner, meaning I didn't have that form of escapism that I used to get from reading, which made me sort of hate reading. And made me just sort of read for the sake of critical thinking and critical analysis. And I wanted to rediscover fun reading, which is when I joined BookTok, which I love and I adore, but I feel like I want a space to speak in long form and to discuss books in their whole and in their entirety. I want to discuss the way that language is used. I want to discuss the way that the author's writing style impacts the book. I want to discuss themes and connotations and motifs. I don't want to just discuss one thing about the book that made me enjoy it and shove it into a 45-second video for the sake of keeping engagement and keeping, people's attention. I want to be in a space where people are used to long-form content and they want to watch long-form content and they want to see a 15-minute discussion or a 15-minute analysis of one book. So I'm hoping that BookTube will be that for me. And yeah, so that's why I started this channel. The next question is, what am I most excited about for joining BookTube? And I feel like that has sort of already been mentioned in the first question, but I'm very excited to be on a platform where I can share book thoughts and book analyses and book criticism or book praises in a long form content where I can sit and I can talk for a while and not worry about no one wanting to listen, not worry about people not caring, which is still a worry for me for BookTube because, BookTube is a difficult place to come and it's very hard to actually get out there and get people to care. But I feel like even if I'm putting it out and even if just 5 people are watching these videos, it's 5 people that cared enough about what I had to say that they sat down for 15 minutes to watch my video. It's such a compliment to me. It's such an honor that someone would actually sit and listen to me speak, just ramble on at camera for 15 minutes. So that's what I'm most excited about. I'm excited about building a community where we all care about what the other has to say, where we all want to sit and listen to someone talk about a book for however long it takes them to talk about that book, or book tropes, or just literature in general and language in general. So that's what I'm most excited about, just developing this community of mutual people who like to discuss books in long form content. This is a difficult one. What unique things can I bring to YouTube? I don't really know how to answer this without sounding like a narcissist, but I'm just going to try and do it in the most, non-narcissistic, generic way possible, and that is that I don't know many Arab Muslim booktubers, and that might just be I haven't stumbled across their accounts. It might genuinely just be a fault of my own that I haven't found them, but I don't know any Arab Muslim booktubers who come on here and discuss other Arab or Muslim or just ethnic Middle Eastern literature, which isn't necessarily to say that that's what my account will be about, but it is just, it feels nice to insert myself into this community and feel like I'm part of an unseen group, I guess we could say, even though that's just really ridiculously ironic for me to say, because look at me, I don't look like someone who would be part of an unseen group. I am pale skin, pale eye, like light brown hair, but yeah, I don't really know many Arab or many Muslim booktubers, and I feel like that can bring a unique perspective, a unique analysis of books, unique recommendations of literature, and I'm very excited to be one of those people, and then maybe perhaps to meet people like me that I just haven't found. Okay, so this one was initially one question, but I amended it to make it two questions because I feel like it would be fun to discuss. The question is, why do I love reading and what got me into it? To answer the second half of that, what got me into it is very unique, but not in the way that you would expect. It's not like me saying, you know, there was a monumental thing in my life that changed the trajectory of my life and it made me want to read. No, I was gaslit. I was gaslit and manipulated into enjoying reading, and the talent and the skill of it and the prize can be awarded to my Arab mother, because she Pavlov dogged me into liking reading. She literally Pavlov dogged me into being a reader, because she used to treat reading as a reward rather than a punishment. So she would, if I was ever misbehaving, my mum would be like, Celine, if you keep behaving like this, I'm not going to let you read before bed. And, you know, the gears in my brain just sort of shifted, and I was like, what do you mean? And so she would just keep doing stuff like that, even though I didn't used to read back then, but she used to just sort of like infiltrate it into my brain, being like, what does she mean by that? And when I do really well, so when I started being able to read, and when she started having time to read to me before bed, and I'd have a really good day, let's say I did really well at school, or I went out and everyone just spoke about how well behaved I was, Mum would be like, you've been such a good girl, Celine, let's read tonight. And I'm like, okay, like whatever you say. So then it got to a point where she would keep doing that. Every time I misbehaved, or every time I didn't want to eat my food, or I didn't want to do something, or I did badly at school, my mom would be like, no reading tonight. You don't get to read tonight. And I'm like, no! Like, this is clearly something that is really fun and really good for me to do, and my mom's forbidding it from me, which means that this is something I need to aspire to do. And like, it just became this thing, like she infiltrated my brain. She's a mad genius, because it became a thing. Like, I was Pavlov dogged into this. She would say, Celine, you have 15 minutes to clean your room. Go clean your room. You have 15 minutes. And I'd go in and clean my room in 7 minutes. It'd be the speediest, quickest way I've ever cleaned my room. And I'd run out to the living room like, Mama, Baba, Mama, I cleaned my room in 7 minutes. Can I read now? And Mama's like, okay, fine, you can read. And then I'd go and I'd notice that something was out of place, and I'd put it back and I'd be like, Mama, like, I actually didn't clean it, but I noticed that it was dirty, so I fixed it. Can I read now? Can I have an extra 15 minutes? And Mama's like, okay, you can have an extra 10 minutes of reading. And I'd be like, oh my God, yay, I can read for 25 minutes tonight. And my mum was like, she would manipulate me into thinking that like it was a difficult thing for her to think about. She'd be like, Celine, you know, extra 5 minutes, it's a little bit difficult for me to let you read for an extra 15 minutes. And I'd be like, Mama, please, I'll be such a good girl tomorrow. And she's like, okay. So that's what got me into reading. Like, my mum literally gaslit and manipulated me into being a reader. So on to the first part of the question, which is, why do I love reading? Why do I still love reading? Now, it could be argued that it is still just leftover Pavlov manipulation that just has literally just made me believe that I enjoy reading, and I might actually hate it, but I'm just still 7 years old trying to appease my mother. Or it could just be the second one, which is I love the escapism of it. I love sitting and picking up a book. I'm one of those readers that I just discovered, you know, you can be the type of reader where you just read and you just see the words, or you can be the type of reader where you read and you can see exactly what is being described. And I'm the latter. I can see exactly what is being described, and it feels like watching a movie for me, you know? That's why I'm able to just sit. I can sit and just read for an hour or 2 hours straight as though I was watching a series. I live inside of this world, which was a bit inconvenient for me when I read books like Shrek erotica, because I can see Shrek and it was just making me so unbelievably uncomfortable. But that is one of the reasons I love reading. I also, being a literature student, I'm very obsessed with words. I'm very obsessed with the way that people choose to use words. And because I studied English language for my A-levels, I'm also very conscious of like decisions people make when they're using language. And authors aren't necessarily always making linguistic decisions when they use certain words or certain sentence phrases. But it's so fascinating for me to study and see the way that authors choose to use language, and also just put all of that aside, put the critical part of it aside. There is, like, you know, there are very few fantastic feelings that you get in life when reading, and one of them is reading a sentence that feels so perfectly constructed that only an angel themselves could have written it. And that is something I absolutely adore about reading, just something so beautiful, that authors make look effortless. And then you sit and you try and write it and you really just sit and ponder on their talent, because it is not effortless and it's not easy to put sentences like that on a paper. Challenges I think I'll face. I think I did cover that a little bit in the first question, which is booktube is huge. It's a very large community. It's a very large platform to sort of put yourself in. And I feel a little bit like an underdog, you know, and I think my problem is, because TikTok has sort of like forced this mindset onto me, my problem is I've slowly started deeming worth by numbers, and it's hard to get numbers on YouTube. You know, TikTok became easy. Once you figure out the algorithm, once you figure out a certain video, your video just gets thrown out to people and numbers can build. And you sort of, you know, when you get sucked into that platform and that security of numbers and view counts and like counts and comment counts, you become a little bit obsessed with it, which is why I'm sort of just trying to take a break from that and just try and remember that my worth is not valued by how many people watch my videos. So I think the biggest challenge will be making peace with the fact that I will not be getting as many views and likes and comments on YouTube as I used to on TikTok, or I still do on TikTok, anytime soon, if ever. I could be at this for 5 years and still only have maybe 250 subscribers and get 25 views on a video, and that's absolutely fine. And it's just going to be consistently reminding myself of that, because if you really think about it, if you walk into a room and there are 250 human beings there, there's 250 human beings there waiting just to listen to you speak, 250 human beings who like you, who care about what you have to say. That is monumental. Not a lot of people can say that. 250 human beings. And I think that's the issue with TikTok and numbers and social media. People think 1,000 is nothing, 100,000 is nothing. 200 people, 200 human beings. You can't fill 2 classrooms at school with 200 people. That is so many people. Like, that is your entire year group. Imagine an entire class, an entire year group of people who care about what you have to say. That is such a compliment. That is so monumental. And I think my biggest challenge will just be reminding myself of that, and sort of reminding myself that this is for myself and this is for me to put that content out there and for people who want to listen to find it. But also, I think another challenge will be just sort of making a name for myself in a community that is so large and so overpopulated. What do I like to read? I love young adult, high fantasy specifically. I specify high fantasy because low fantasy and young adult doesn't really necessarily do it for me. I love high fantasy. I love opening a book and there being a map at the front. I love there being completely new fantasy systems. I love there being completely new political orders. I love just falling into a world that would never possibly exist. I adore it. YA fantasy has my heart. I feel like it gets a lot of stick from a lot of people, but you need to really think. YA fantasy authors are able to put into a 400-page book what adult fantasy authors need to put in a 600 book. They make it digestible. They make it accessible. It is the type of literature that people who might not speak English can finally, jump into for fantasy. People who aren't readers, disabled people, people who just need something accessible and something quick. It's also cheaper than adult fantasy for a lot of people, And I feel like it's exciting. You fit in politics, you fit in fantasy, you fit in world orders, you fit in rules of magic, and you've managed to find room for friendship and romance. It's just such a magical space for me. Second to that would be contemporary romance. I adore contemporary romance, but it needs to be adult contemporary romance, because I feel like when I read YA contemporary romance, I just don't sit with it. It doesn't resonate with me. I don't really enjoy it too much. So contemporary adult romance, but it has to be diverse. Not to say I won't read romance by white authors. That's a lie. I literally will read Emily Henry's grocery list. I just mean I don't want to read this book and know that this author is low-key kind of racist. There's undertones of just microaggressions. I don't want to read a book by someone where I can tell they've never met, a person of color before in their entire life. I'd love to read more contemporary romance of, young Muslims and young Arabs. I don't really see a lot of those, and I don't really read a lot of those, but again, I might just be looking in the wrong places. But that's what I love to read. And then I adore dystopia. So third on the list is dystopia. I adore dystopia, especially a type of dystopia where you don't know what's going on, but you can notice political commentary and social commentary and, government and colonial commentary. I love stuff like that. I love when dystopia does it right. Where do I read? I currently read most on my commute to and from work. I have an hour-long journey to work, and my commute, my straight commute on the train is 45 minutes. So I read for 45 minutes there and 45 minutes back. And that's when I get most of it done. I do work in the creative industry, which means that sometimes I'm a little bit burnt out when I get home from work and I don't have creative juices. But on days when I'm not burnt out like that, I will read at home in my bed, just right under my covers on my 3 pillows with my teddy bear just snuggled against my chest. That's when I will read. And if I have an empty house or I have a free house, I will either read on this sofa or my really cozy sofa near the fireplace, which I'll send you a picture because I don't want to turn the camera around, I'm lazy. So those are the 3 places I read. I try to read in the park in summer, but it's just too many people. There's too many people around. I don't want to do it. I like silence. I don't even really listen to music when I'm reading. I just like dead silence. So that's where I read. So I mentioned earlier that I inserted a few more questions in there for you to get to know me better personally, instead of just me as a reader, but me as a person. So the first one for that is, what are my hobbies? So first hobby is, I am a baker and a cook to my core. When I was unemployed, literally I spent every single day experimenting. I once spent 4 hours making dumpling dough so I can make gyoza from scratch because I just wanted to prove that I could. I used to run a cake business where I baked and sold cakes for 2.5 years. I started that business in COVID. I started learning 2 years before COVID. I loved it. I'm not gonna lie, I do make some pretty banging cakes. Like my cakes are pretty good. They're banging. My cookies are insane. So yeah, when I was unemployed, I spent so much time in the kitchen, and I hate that I can't do it as much now because I do work full time, meaning I don't have the time to sit in the kitchen for 4 hours because I have so much other stuff to do. And I like to cook slowly. I like to take my time with it. I like to pour myself and my heart into it because it's a hobby for me. It's not a chore. And when I have to do it quickly, it feels like a chore. I want to put my headphones in. I want to listen to my, children's cartoon theme songs while I'm listening. I want to listen to like camp rock and stuff when I'm cooking, or like the Hamilton playlist. I want to feel like I'm having fun. The next hobby of mine is writing. I am textbook English literature student. If I'm not reading and I'm not cooking, I am probably writing. I'm either writing a 12-page journal entry about like a 10-second encounter I had that just made me feel a certain poetic way and I had to talk about it, or I'm writing endless poetry. I write a lot of spoken word poetry and I do perform spoken word poetry every few months, but those take it out of me and I don't do it a lot because my spoken word poetry is very, very vulnerable and it's a very deep insight into who I am as a person. So I can't do that every month because it just takes a lot out of me. The last time I performed was in July, and writing that poem took me 4.5 weeks, and after performing it I was so like poetically drained that I didn't write a poem for another 3 months. But yes, writing is one of my hobbies. I have written a poetry book, which is on Amazon. I also like to make rings. I don't do this as often as I should, and I don't do this as often as I used to when I was unemployed, but I make those little wire rings, and I taught myself to do it through TikTok. And then I started making spoon rings because I just went to my local charity shops, my local like thrift shops, and I would just grab these really cool like rings, and I would use this old rusty saw that I had, and I'd saw it and I'd burn it, and then I'd snap it in half, and then I'd saw it down, and I'd file it down, and I'd bend it, like adjust it, and I made so many of them, and I made too many that I started giving them out to all of my friends because I made so many of them. But I love doing that and I don't do it nearly as much as I should. Next is, what books do I never plan on reading? I will never read A Little Life. I will never read A Little Life unless someone pays me. Unless you are paying me to read that book, and unless that figure is in thousands, I'm not reading that book. I looked up the trigger warnings for that book and I scrolled 3 times. 3 pages worth of trigger warnings. It just feels like trauma porn. It just feels like, trauma porn for the sake of trauma. And it's just like, I just don't want to read it. And it's just huge. And like every single person I've seen reading it is crying by page 100, which feels to me like you've written this book for the sake of traumatizing your readers and traumatizing your characters rather than like writing a book. And, that's just my perception of it. I'm never going to read it. I'm never going to read the Selection series because I just don't want to. It just doesn't appeal to me. The main character is called America Singer, and she's an American singer. And that just gave me the ick. I'm never going to read the Game of Thrones book series just because I've watched the show and I adored the show, and this is my problem. If I watch the show or the movie before I read the book, I'm never going to read the books, which is why I always want to read the books first. So I'm never going to read the Game of Thrones series. I'm never going to read The Hobbit. I'm never going to read the Lord of the Rings series, which sucks, but it's like, oh, I've already seen the movie. Now I'm never going to imagine it the way the author wanted me to imagine it because I just have this image in my brain of what they're like. I'm never going to read Haunting Adeline. Every single thing I've heard about that book is the absolute antithesis of what I would enjoy reading. I'm never going to read that. And finally, this is a little bit cringy, but I'm going to do it. What are 3 things I love about the world? Number 1, willow trees. I love them. I think I've written about 10 poems just about willow trees in my lifetime. Number 2 is speaking to strangers, because there is just, not in like the dangerous way, but in the like speaking to people you didn't know before you started this conversation. It's just There are so many people in the world with so many life experiences and so many things that they adore and hate about life, and so much advice that they can give. Even little children have experienced different lives to what I've lived. And it's fun and it's exciting to see the way that people think, and to just discover this human being that I never would have known existed had I not sparked up this conversation with them. I feel like it's so important to spark up conversations with people when you know you're in a safe space, in a safe area, because it's like human connection is such a beautiful thing. And I experience feelings of sonder all the time, and it makes me want to shoot myself, because I'm like, so many people are living so many lives, I'm never going to get to know them. So I love taking the opportunity to get to know as many people as I can. And finally, I love hearing people laugh, which is like the cringiest thing I've ever said in my entire life, but I literally love it. Everyone has such a different and unique laugh. And like, some people have such ugly laughs, and it just makes them even so much more entertaining and so much more lovable to listen to. So yeah. I'm going to add one, which is, what are 3 bookish things I like? I love detailed, beautiful maps at the front. I love when you take off a dust jacket and the hardcover is absolutely stunning, and it's foiled and it's detailed and it's colourful. And I love when the text is the perfect font and size. I'm very particular about font and size, and when the text is too small or an ugly font, I just literally refuse to read that book. So I love it when the text is just like that perfect size and font. But yeah, that was my booktube newbie tag. I hope at least one person made it to the end of this, because I tend to ramble on for quite some time. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed. If there's anything you would like to know about me, or anything that I said that you related to, let me know. And